And I suppose that the the tension where that brings the tension, um there's still a bit of tension, unresolved tension between the sort of the two positions here, the zero bucks position and the black lamb move, and that's in terms of the radical break. So
Mhm.
I think I think people I think Doug Lane and Mark Fisher would advocate for a radical break and the need for a radical break with the current society. Whereas, and we'll get into this further next chat probably, whereas Lachlan Mouffe are advocating for a staying within liberal democracy, but a reinterpretation of what liberty and equality means.
Yeah, like a repositive, like a positive charging of these things taking, I guess, yeah, we shouldn't abandon the better or more admirable, not admirable, I guess, yeah, what they kind of classify as like the better elements of liberal democracy. Whereas, but rather than just leave them to say, oh no, they're doing fine the way they are, it's rather the continuous practicing of those in order to expose any, I suppose, weaknesses or any kind of contradictions that we have within the current integration of these ideals, like equality, um, and yeah, well, equality and liberty, and then try and attempt to push past those, but while maintaining a positive charge of these elements rather than abandoning them altogether. Whereas, yeah, I guess, like as you're saying, Lane and Mark are sort of saying, you know, it's failed. We should, we need a radical shift from these things towards something else.
Yeah, I mean,
Mm.
I mean, I assume sort of like the baseline for socialism is to have that radical break,
Mm.
um, and Lachlan Move for attempting to say, "Oh no, 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 it's not necessary, guys. Let's just hijack the infrastructure that exists through hegemonic processes." Now, in terms of all the frontiers, we'll be talking about later on in the series. Um, that's absolutely that's I would absolutely agree. We've got to sort of use every material avenue, every existing avenue at our disposal, and to push that hegemonic the war of position on each of those fronts. Um, that is not to say, though, that if a radical break was to the opportunity to have a radical break, should or should not be, well, should not be taken. Not to say that it should not be taken. Um, and so obviously Lachlan would disagree, and it is just about having a democratic version of neoliberalism in government, but also once that's achieved, to take every sort of relationship where power is a factor and democratize it, which isn't to neutralize power, but to sort of articulate a position um, where that power is visible and where the value of that power is negotiated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but my issue, and I wonder, is later Muff, is she feeling the same? But my issue reading the earlier stuff is that I wondered, with this Frederick Jameson notion of the bourgeois individual, that could we ever get to the point where, particularly with our current cultural situation and manifestation of the individual, could we escape that without a radical break? Is there a way, say, like if you take any subsection of society, um, where those possessing of an alternative view of democracy would be in a position to actually articulate that. Um, it's almost as if Lachlan are forgetting their own, like one of their founding principles, that power has to be recognized. So it just seems like if you take like a young urbanite and how does the conversation go, the practicalities of the conversation with, say, someone from the rural working class, which is obviously what happened in the left in the UK in the last few months. Both, kind of on the left. Yeah, actually, no, they were, of course. It was the Red Wall that fell, isn't it? So they were on the left up the north working class. And but they felt that the liberal urbanite youth aspect of the left was stealing a march, and they failed to identify with the overall project. So, without a radical break, how do we sort of overcome that? If you know what I mean, is that clear? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense.
Any
takes?
Any takes? I mean, I guess that's a tough question. So it's not so much answering that question, but I mean, I suppose we're not here to say yes or no. I mean, like, I don't even think that I'd have a definitive personal stance. That's just like my worry is how do we get past that conversation or that form of conversation? How does the if the, say, just an essentialized term rather than it's required complexity, without its required complexity, how does a what has been continuously disempowered over decades rural working class individual identity, how does that get to the point where it can confidently assert its vision for individuality when in the same party, the same political field, the left, and another subsection of that party has such a confident sense of self and like a publicly legitimate sense of self. Of course, the hegemonic articulation is to undermine that assertive aspect, but how does that kick off if that lack of confidence is there? And that's a power relation then. So in terms of radical break, I think that might be the reason why, in relation to Lachlan moves position on it.